I'm Penelope Hunter-Steeble. I've worked with many museums in different countries, but I've never known one like this. For me, it was love at first sight. But I completely misunderstood the character of the object of my affection. I thought it had to be a restored mission, hundreds of years old. I found out it was a purpose-built art gallery and built between April of 1916 and November of 1917. And that this building defined the Santa Fe that we see today. Just months after New Mexico was finally granted statehood in 1912, the Santa Fe City Planning Commission decided that they had to rescue the city from being absorbed into Middle America. Well, that had been happening since the coming of the railroads in the 1880s. Now, this building was the model for the development of the city in a way that would create a tourist industry, much needed. You see, it was done for you and me, visitors who'd come to this special place. Some return again and again, and some of us stay. While I tell you more about the building, do have a seat and take in the tradition-steeped atmosphere here. The hand-fashioned woodwork and the ceilings, you'll see them throughout. When they built this place, they were building an idea that it would be possible to adapt traditional Hispanic and Pueblo Indian architecture to modern requirements in a way that could be adopted and make Santa Fe, the city, different. The overall inspiration for the building was the oldest surviving mission church, built in 1629 at Acoma, Pueblo. It still stands there today, but this museum incorporates ideas from other historic buildings too. Now, all the missions were made of adobe, and this museum is not. The Spaniards introduced the shaping of adobe, mud, into sun-dried bricks. Then the bricks were plastered over with mud. Now, this building is not that dissimilar in technique, but the bricks were kiln-fired and made by inmates in the state penitentiary. I found in the archives that the penitentiary supplied 750,000 bricks. Now, this was supplemented by 48,000 pounds of steel girders brought from Chicago and 2,800 barrels of cement from the Ideal Cement Company in Colorado. Now, that cement served two purposes. There were structural, concrete elements, but they also diluted the cement and mixed it with sand and plaster to apply to the bricks to create the soft shapes that look like adobe. Now, all those sculptural contours that you see in the building today are the original plasterwork. Only the stucco color coating has had to be redone, and that only 3 times since 1917. The architects of record were Isaac Rapp and his firm, but the real creators were the archaeologists, artists, and civic leaders who took up the crusade to stop the loss of Santa Fe's character. You see, adobe dwellings were being rapidly replaced by big brick commercial buildings with plate glass windows and brick bungalow-style cottages. The leader in the movement was the archaeologist Edgar Lee Hewitt. He was a cultural entrepreneur. He founded and led multiple institutions. He saved the Palace of the Governors and turned it into the Museum of New Mexico before he added on the Art Museum. He was backed by the Honorable Frank Springer, an attorney, very wealthy and very politically influential. Hewitt hired on his protégés, who worked collectively, a kind of team of pals, and they all used their nicknames. There was Sylvanus Griswold Morley, known as Van. He was the Harvard man who spent half the year in Santa Fe promoting the city different, and the other half year in Mexico, becoming the preeminent archaeologist of Mayan Yucatan. Then there was Kenneth Chapman. Diligent, administrator, and trained as an illustrator. He became an expert on Pueblo Indian art. Carlos Vieira, very colorful painter, quite a character, who came to Santa Fe to cure his lung ailments, as so many more were to do. Vieira was the first resident artist of what was to become a thriving art colony. Jesse Nussbaum. Nuss, tall, lanky archaeologist, photographer, and motorcyclist. He had a hands-on background because his father was a contractor who owned a brickyard. It was Nuss who restored the Palace of the Governors. things happen fast around here. In the fall of 1912, they staged the new Old Santa Fe exhibition with images and models of what Santa Fe architecture could, and they hoped would, be. Now, Van Morley had seen a photo of a Colorado mining camp with a warehouse facade based on the Acoma mission. So he found the architect, Rapp, and he asked him to make a watercolor to use in the display. Now, around this time, Hewitt was invited to be director of exhibits at the Panama, California exposition that was going to open in San Diego in 1915. So he went to Rapp and he asked him to develop that Acoma-inspired warehouse into a pavilion for the state of New Mexico. Well, the New Mexico building in San Diego was such a huge popular success that it convinced the legislature to okay the model for a new art museum. The construction budget was $60,000. Seems like nothing today. Half of that came from the legislature and half of that from private sources. That's where the Honorable Frank Springer went to work raising the funds. Jesse Nussbaum was appointed superintendent of construction, and it was Nuss who fleshed out the outlines that Rapp provided.